What's up, guys? Daniel Elias here, and we're back in my fishing shack here at home. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about drop shot worms. Not so much the technique, but more of the worm. Why my favorite is my favorite, why it's not made anymore, and why I'm hopeful that maybe at some point it will come back. So I want to start with a little history first. When the drop shot was first introduced, there really wasn't a worm that was designed for it, right? We adapted other things. This came over from Japan. And when I first heard about it, I was a kid. And we adapted a lot of worms at that time that were primarily used for finesse rigs, real small finesse Texas rigs, but primarily worms that we use split shotting. And we took those split shot worms and we used them in a drop shot technique. Now, fast forward a whole bunch of years, and obviously drop shotting's become very popular around the country, where it first started out in the West Coast out here, and when we realized how good it was, it slowly has caught on and moved east. The first worms that I really used for drop shotting were a Berkeley worm. It's not a big secret. I've been a Berkeley fan since I was a little kid. I couldn't tell you how many bass I've caught on them. But my first experience with taking a worm and using it for drop shotting was an old Berkeley finesse worm. And I've still got some here. Originally they came in a pack that kind of looked like this. This is a June bug color that came out. It was a split shot worm. And eventually we got a hold of these big, giant, 100 packs of a Berkeley finesse worm. Why I liked it, it's a thin worm. It only came in one size, right? It was a 4-inch worm, super thin. It does have a flat bottom, a slight flat bottom, not very pronounced. It's more rounded on top. And that flat bottom when you're drop shotting is really, really important. So what a lot of people think when you're throwing a drop shot is you throw it out there and you're shaking your rod, and that really gets the fish in there and makes them bite. I totally disagree with that. I think, when you're shaking it, that can get a fish's attention. A bass can pay attention to it and move over. But why does a bass eat a drop shot? And if you notice, when you get a bite when you're drop shotting, it's typically not when you're sitting there and you're shaking that worm. You might shake it and stop, or you might shake it and pull it and stop. But what I feel triggers a bite on a drop shot is that worm may be up here shaking, and then all of a sudden it stops. And it sort of settles, and it can glide a little bit on the way down, right? So you have a worm that has this slow glide. So when you look at the best drop shot worms made, they're typically flat on the bottom because that's kind of conducive to that settling or that glide. So I really feel like shaking it brings them in, but really letting it settle and settle naturally is what really gets a fish to actually bite that worm. So this worm was okay at it. Let's be real, it was okay. It had a slight flat bottom. It didn't settle that great, but what the benefit to it is they are absolutely loaded with power bait scent. If I pick up this package and the labels fell off, but if you look at it, those things are juicy, right? It's just covered in power bait scent still to this day. So I think that's a big factor, is having something that you have some scent to. And giving the fish a reason to hold on to it to get a good hook set. So we went from this worm. My second favorite worm, I shouldn't say second favorite, but the second worm that really came out that I had tried was what's called a Berkeley custom poured finesse worm. So we went from the Berkeley finesse worm to a custom poured finesse worm. And some of you may remember these, but they look like this, right? They came in these, sort of almost like a clamshell package, but molded packaging where each worm is in there individually. Here's the benefit. They always came out straight, right? So you pull one out of the package and it's straight. It's not going to twist when you're reeling it in. You're not going to deal with a whole lot of line twists. Now, this worm was not made for drop shotting. We just used it on a drop shot. So, and actually, if you look at the back of one of these packages, and you can see what it says, right? How to rig it, Texas style. That was what they knew. Now out west, we split shotted with them a lot, or through like what they call a mojo rig. But I started using this on a drop shot and did really, really well. Now, fast forward a few years, right, to probably, I don't know, I'm guessing before 2010 for sure, late 2000s. Berkeley kind of made their foray into their first drop shot specific worm, and they came out with what's called the hand-poured finesse worm. Okay. This was the first worm that Berkeley really designed to be thrown on a drop shot. So it has the flat bottom. It's salted, right? And salted on the bottom, which helps, salt is heavy. So it helps keep that worm with the bottom down, prevents it from rolling over and spinning when you're reeling it in, which really, really helps. So they made it in a few sizes. You got a 4-inch, a 6-inch, a 7-inch straight-tailed worm. They even did a curly tail worm, which I have here, and I'll try to take one out so you can see it if I can get the package open. But they all worked really well. A lot of salt. I mean, you can see this bait is loaded with salt, right? Flat bottom to it. But this was the curly tail model. And I threw the straight tail model a lot, and I still do, right? Matter of fact, this worm specifically right here. So this is gonna be your hand-poured finesse worm. So that's the bottom, right? And you can see it's flat on the bottom, more rounded on top, but covered in salt. Matter of fact, when I fished the Paul George Celebrity Bass Tournament, I think it's that plaque right there, I got second in that tournament on a lake in California, Castaic, that I had never fished before. So I showed up to that lake and I just went fishing. Had a basketball player with, so Paul George is there. You had Russell Westbrook, a bunch of other NBA players. I fished with Abdel Nader, who's on the Phoenix Suns now. And we got second place in that tournament, had the big fish of that tournament, and every fish that we caught came on that hand-poured finesse worm. Why does it work so good? Number one, flat on the bottom. Number two, salted on the bottom, right? Lets it settle very well. And number three, it's loaded with power bait scent. And I'm a huge believer in power bait scent, right? It just works. Now, one of these is my favorite. Can you guess which one? You may not. It's actually the second one, the custom poured finesse worm. Now, this bait is not salted. That's sort of the downfall to it. But the benefit to this bait is they always came out of the package straight. Okay, so, and I'll pull one of them out of this package so you can see it. This is the softest worm that I've ever fished on a drop shot. I mean, it's just so soft. It'll double over on itself. The hand-poured finesse worm is pretty soft too. The older finesse worms, not so much, but it's just a super soft worm. They would come in triple pours with different colors. So this one's got, brown and some green on the bottom with some purple and cinnamon flake in there. Used to be an Apache Lake killer, actually. But that's one's probably my favorite, just simply because of the consistency, how consistent they came out. Now, unfortunately, they stopped making all of these a long time ago, including the hand-poured finesse worm. And a number of us with Berkeley have been just needling them and poking them and prodding them like, we want it back, right? And they're pretty hesitant, if I'm being honest. And I'll tell you why. So originally, when these worms came out, they didn't sell very well. So when you think about a company like Berkeley, it's a massive company, a big company, right? Part of Pure Fishing. And what speaks to them is sales. At the time when that bait was released, drop shotting was really only a thing on the West Coast. And by the West Coast, I mean California and Arizona. It was not something that really moved into Texas. It hadn't moved east of the Mississippi. So it wasn't something that they could generate massive sales from, right? Fast forward now to 2022, and the environment is a lot different. Drop shotting is much more mainstream. It's used all over the country, all over the world, really, where you fish for bass. And it's something that's much more popular. So in my opinion, it's something that they could probably sell a lot of now. So I've been needling the heck out of them, trying to get something made and giving them my ideas and my input. Whether or not they try to produce something and test it, I don't know. but I'm hopeful for the future. Point is, if you see any of these baits out here, right, particularly this one or this one, buy them up and use them. They work really, really, really well. And generally speaking, what you want in a drop shot worm is something that's very soft, right? You want it to be soft. It gives it more action. You want it to be flat on the bottom to have that glide, or even a concave shape is okay a little bit. But you want it to glide a little bit, and you want cool colors, right? So out west, color can actually be a really big deal. Now, the old West Coast manufacturers originally started hand pouring all their baits, and obviously the way they sell them now, that's not possible. So they have, you know, robots basically that will pour different layers to them. There's still some inherent difficulties there. They fade. Most of them don't always come straight. So, you know, what happens a lot of times is you may pull one out that's a color you like, you rig it up, it's spinning, you take it right back off, put a different one on. I may go through 3 or 4 worms before I find one that really works for me. So in my mind, if a company could come out with, you know, a flat bottom bait that's scented, you know, ideally with power bait scent, and, you know, has that good gliding action, but comes out straight and is soft and made good colors, it'd be the perfect drop shot worm. You know, so what does the future hold? I have no idea, but I'm hopeful that we'll see a Berkeley worm at some point in the future that's gonna, you know, check all those boxes that make sense. In the meantime, you know, there's a lot of really good drop shot worms out there. You know, I don't know what your favorite is. This happens to be mine, right? Maybe in the comments below, let me know, what's your favorite bait, right? What's your favorite worm to drop shot? What's your favorite color? Where do you do it? I'm kind of curious, right? Because I'm always open to learning new things. But hopefully it just gives you a little insight into the history of the drop shot style worm in Berkeley and power bait, why it's not around anymore. Kind of hoping to just share some knowledge and have some fun here, make some videos at home. So if you like the content, you know, if you want to see more, like and subscribe at the bottom. I really appreciate all the feedback I've gotten. I continue to try to make some pretty cool content for you. And thanks for tuning in. We will see you on the next one, guys. Have a great day.